Thank you all for being here. I am Kenneth Ravenel, lead counsel for the Black family, representing the privilege of ours to represent the Black family and Anton Black and try to bring justice in this very courthouse to Anton Black. You all know that we have filed a lawsuit seeking justice for Anton. We know that we will never be able to bring Anton back. But we do know that there is some ability to get justice, and that justice has to come through the courts, but it also has to come from public opinion, from those of us who have strived and fought for so long. Those behind me, we're going to speak to you today. Many of them involved in this pursuit have been involved in this pursuit a lot longer than I have. When this young man was brutally killed 3 years ago, many people in the community on the eastern shore in Caroline County fought for justice for Anton. Things did not happen. We were asked to join this fight. We did with the ACLU to make sure that the community understood that there has to be some effort to bring justice for Anton and his family. And what has been amazing is to have people like Senator Carter and Delegate Acevedo to join that fight and to get Anton's law passed through the General Assembly. And what we wanted to do today was not only to talk about Anton and what happened to him, I apologize, what happened to Anton, but to actually get those who fought so hard to get that bill passed, to try to get some type of police reform in this community, in this state, to have them talk to you about how that was accomplished and what they think this will bring. We know that there's a lot more work to be done. There's a lot more work to be done in this federal courthouse where those police officers have now filed a motion to dismiss our case under what you all have heard, this qualified immunity, this thing that has to be wiped out. We know that there's a fight right now in Congress, particularly in the Senate, trying to get the George Floyd legislation passed. And one of the aims there is to try to rid us of this qualified immunity, something that the courts created that is not part of our Constitution, that protects police officers who kill Black and brown people and never are punished. We must get rid of qualified immunity. So there's been some things that have happened here in this community, in this state. And you're going to hear about those things. But you're also going to hear from Anton's family, because nothing is more important than knowing about what happened to Anton. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Senator Carter to speak to you, and then Delegate Acevedo to speak to you about Anton's law and what's going to happen tomorrow, and that goes into effect. But then we're going to talk and have others talk to you. Renee Swafford, who's fought this battle for so long, is an attorney on behalf of the family. You hear David Young talk about why the ACLU has been involved and how they're involved in this pursuit for justice. And of course, you hear from Anton's sister, his father, and maybe his mother about their fight for justice for their son, because they are the catalysts. They are the ones who have continued this fight. So without further ado, Delegate Carter. Senator.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Attorney Ravenel, and most of all, I want to extend my ongoing and continued condolences to the Anton Black family, who has been forced to do what so many families have to do, which is turn their pain into policy. And while we're very happy, Delegate Gabriel Acevedo and I are very happy that we were able to pass Anton's law at long last, because it took several years to get that done. We know that the family still seeks justice. And so why we're here, Anton Black was a 19-year-old teenager killed brutally by what I would characterize as an unnecessary and even illegal arrest. And he was one of 31 extrajudicial killings. I'm going to take this off. Sorry. He was one of 31 extrajudicial killings in Maryland in the year 2018. The veil of secrecy around police records has prevented transparency and accountability for victims, their families, and the public. Policing is a public function, yet the actions of officers have been shrouded in a veil of secrecy for far too long. With the public disclosure of these police records, agencies will be less inclined to ignore public complaints, to downgrade them, and fail to render discipline when warranted. My hope is that with the passage of Anton's law, we will no longer allow the patterns and practices of unconstitutional policing which gave rise to the current Baltimore consent decree. It will stymie the culture of corruption within policing, created within policing and permitted operations such as the Gun Trace Task Force. And most importantly, we will save lives by preventing other heinous, brutal extrajudicial killings such as that of Anton Black. I believe that this is the first time in the state of Maryland that there's ever been the ability for actual complainants, their families, and victims to receive access to the records of the very officers that have brutalized and sometimes killed them. And so this is a landmark day. We're happy to be here on the eve of the passage of this, but as Attorney Ravenel said, we have much more work to do with ending qualified immunity and also ensuring that officers such as Thomas Webster IV, who is primarily responsible as other officers participated in the brutal killing of Anton Black, to make sure that officers like that are not allowed into the field of policing, and once they are and have incidents as this officer did, are never allowed to change and transfer police forces. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce the House sponsor of Anton's Law, Gabriel Acevedo.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Delegate Gabriel Acevedo, and I represent Maryland's 39th Legislative District in Montgomery County. And I was the House sponsor for Anton's Law for many years. And to see not only this bill pass, but to know that it will take effect tomorrow on October 1st, not only speaks to the struggle of the Black family, but so many other families in Maryland who have experienced or are family members or know someone who have experienced police violence and did not receive any kind of a transparency and certainly didn't receive any kind of accountability. And let me be clear, we are not seeking justice for Anton, because justice would have been Anton being alive today with his daughter, with his family, with the very community that raised him. But what we can get and what we're fighting for is accountability, whether it's in the courts, whether it's in Annapolis through the passage of Anton's Law that will not only ensure transparency, but ensure that those members of the public who are seeking information about investigative and misconduct records, that information is not only accessible, but we're changing the way law enforcement operates in our communities. And we could have certainly have had Anton Black today if this bill was passed years ago. In fact, we could have had so many folks here today, from Freddie Gray to Anton Black to Corin Gaines and to so many other folks right here in Maryland who are victims of police violence, whose names will not be enshrined in law, but the injustice of their killing is worthy of all of us doing something, whether it's changing laws or whether it's changing the people in power who refuse to change the laws to ensure that communities have transparency and accountability. I want to be very clear that while the passage of Anton's Law is a victory not just for the family, for the community, but for our movement, that there's so much more work that we need to do. As was mentioned, when we talk about accountability in the courts, the fact that we have a judge-created policy like qualified immunity that prevents law enforcement officers from being held accountable in the very institutions that we would expect to be holding law enforcement accountable, and that is the courts. And there's so much more work that we need to do at the state level right here in Maryland on policing. While we're focused on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, and we certainly want to ensure that the Breathe Act is also passed at the congressional level, which is equally as important as the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, because it goes so far as to encompass what our communities have been calling for a long time, which is to not only defund, but to shift funding from law enforcement to our communities and into social infrastructure that will not only keep us safe, but will bring down crime. That's what we should be doing. And at the state level, we should be fighting for even more, because while we did some work this legislative session on police reform, I want to be clear that we did not transform public safety to ensure that there are no more Anton Blacks, there are no more Corin Gaines, there are no more Freddie Grays, and so many others. We have not done that work as yet. So just like we're paying attention to the enactment of Anton's law, let's focus on the work that we still need to do, from ending qualified immunity in state court, which is something that Colorado and New Mexico have done, and we certainly should have done this year when I submitted the amendment, but we did not. And that is a failure to the communities who have asked us to do better. We need to do more to ensure that communities have oversight and control, not civilian participation, which is what we did this year, but real control over public safety systems. Because had the community of Greensboro had control, Thomas Webster would have never been hired at all. We need to ensure that we're rooting out white nationalism and white supremacy from law enforcement. We cannot pretend it is not enough to acknowledge the white supremacist history of law enforcement in the United States. We know the history. What are we doing to root out white nationalism in law enforcement, both here in Maryland as well as across the country? What are we doing to ensure that we're getting cops out of schools that continues to criminalize Black and Latinx and LGBTQ+ and students with disabilities? All of this is the work that we still need to do, that we could have done, but we didn't do. So while we're honoring Anton Black today, and we should all remember him, because he should still be alive today, he should still be embracing his daughter, there's a missing seat at the table. We have so much more that we need to do to truly honor Anton Black and so many other folks. And I ask us to pay attention, because the General Assembly, the Maryland General Assembly, while they passed Anton's law, they've not done enough. They've not done enough. My hope is that we could not only get accountability in the courts for Anton Black and for the community that helped raise him, but we could get true transparency and accountability in Annapolis, where we're transforming public safety and not reimagining it, but transforming it in a way where communities that are most impacted, like Anton Black's family, they're centered. Their voices are centered. So let's continue to pay attention to this. I'll continue to stand in solidarity with the family. Thank you so much to the attorneys who are continuing to fight for the family and for Anton in the court. And let's continue to fight for his family and other families and victims of police violence in the streets, as well as in the state capitol. Thank you.
Can he join our legal team? I tell you, listen, you've heard from a senator and a delegate, those who fought to get Anton's law passed. But before we got to that law being passed, there were those in the community who were fighting for Anton almost from day one. And one of those individuals, long before I joined this fight, long before the ACLU joined this fight, was and is Renee Swafford, a local attorney in that neighborhood, who's been so instrumental in bringing Anton's matter to us and those in the community beyond the Caroline County community. And I wanted you to hear today from Ms. Swafford.
God is good.
God is good. Time.
In that same tradition of call and response, when you all hear me say, can't nobody save us, I want you all to say, but us. And I was feeling that. We are all here today because we're focused on justice for Anton Black. We are all here struggling and focusing on justice for Anton Black. The passage of Anton's law will go a long way as a major first step for our community locally, as well as leading the way for true police reform nationwide. But when are we going to address the family? Justice for Anton Black's family, especially his mother, for his mother, who witnessed the tragedy as she stood at her own front door, watching helplessly as law enforcement killed her son. She had to stand there, unable to show any human emotion or to assist her child. Her composure that dark night was eerily similar to the same way Philando Castell's girlfriend responded to law enforcement when they killed him. Out of fear, this mother, this loving mother, Anton's mother, had to compose herself the entire time while they were killing her son. And even in the midst of her pain, her anguish, and her fear, she was the only one on the scene that night that did anything to try and de-escalate the situation. And the whole time she's cooperating with law enforcement, they're killing her son. Now you need to take a look at that. When you look at the body-worn camera footage, you don't see Janelle scream, holler, cry, or rush to the aid of her child. She was frozen in fear. And we need that to stop. And we need it to stop today. Because Anton's life matters. Our life matters. And I need everybody who's here to know we all have a duty to step up to the plate. And what I mean by that is when you go to church on Sunday morning and you fall on your knees in prayer, when you get up, we need you to take action. We need you to register to vote. We need you to exercise your right and get out there and vote, because your vote is, or lack of it, is what put these judges on the benches. Your vote or lack of it is what puts the state's attorney in this position, the person who makes the decision whether or not to convene a grand jury. And I say that because we all have a duty to be the change that we want to see, because can't nobody save us but us.
When Renee started that fight in Caroline County fighting for Anton, there's a group that was formed to help with that fight. And before you hear from Debbie G on the ACLU, I want you to hear from Richard Potter and his coalition that they put together to help seek justice. Now, this has been a long march, and the march, we're not over yet. And we still have a judge in this courthouse who's reviewing that motion to dismiss, that motion for summary judgment. We have filed papers, the court is yet to rule. We are convinced that to do the right thing, the judge will deny their request for qualified immunity. The law screams out for it. The back screams out for that. We believe the judge is going to do the right thing in due time. Richard Potter and his coalition, they formed to fight for justice for Anton Black. Let's continue that fight along with Renee and others. And I'll ask you to listen to Richard Potter.
Good afternoon. First, let me thank Senator Jill Carter and Delegate Gabriel Acevedo, who are pioneers in their own right, but for their willingness to listen to the constituents of Maryland, but also for their determination in upholding the words that are penned in the Constitution, that all men are created equal. Let me thank Debbie Gian, the legal director, and all the staff of the ACLU who helped us mobilize and tell the story of Anton Black. And finally, let me thank Mr. Anton and Janelle Black, and along with the other members of the Black family. It is because of their strength that I draw strength to continue to pursue justice on behalf of their son, brother, cousin, nephew, and uncle, Anton Black. The passing of Anton's law was not easy, but it was the efforts of the beloved communities throughout Maryland that came together, worked together, and ultimately we achieved together the passage of Anton's law. Starting on October 1, 2021, and I quote, Anton law declares that police misconduct records are not personnel records, therefore allowing the victim of police brutality to know about the misconduct via Public Information Act request. The passage of Anton's law will better shed light on the quality of misconduct investigations and provide the victim with the information they need to achieve justice, end quote. So how do we as community coalitions and advocates for justice move forward and continue to progress on what is so overdue in Maryland and in our country when it comes to fair treatment of Black and brown people? We must indoctrinate ourselves with the full understanding of these police reform laws in Maryland, as well as working with the police departments to make sure that the procedures to these new laws are communicated to our communities and is being implemented without delay. Now, if you have not already done so, we need to contact our local heads of our police department and ask them to meet with their constituents to discuss the implementation of House Bill 670 and what the civilian participation in the disciplinary process looks like. And how is it that you and others can be a part of that process? I do recognize that House Bill 670 does not cover the community oversight in the manner which most of us would have liked to see, but at least it pulled the chair from the table so that we can take a seat in the participation. The question becomes, who will we get to take the seat at the table? In closing, we have a short window of opportunity that won't last long. We must seize this opportunity and make every effort count, as the lives of Black and brown people are counting on it. We must ensure and hold accountable these police precincts and departments in implementing these new measures with fidelity, and that we, the beloved community, is involved in that process, so that we will never again witness the unjust killings of individuals like Anton Black, Gary Hopkins Jr., Freddie Gray, Corey Gaines, Tanya Buggs, and Tyrone West. Thank you so much.
As I said, Richard and his coalition has continued the fight and will continue the fight, and you can see why. With someone like Richard leading them, you know they're going to get things done. But before I got involved in this case, I didn't know anything about this case a couple of years ago, and I was contacted by the ACLU. Said, Ken, no one has stepped forward to help Renee Swafford on the Eastern Shore fight for justice for Anton Black. No lawyers have done it. And I looked at the case. I represent, obviously, Cody Gaines in the Corey Gaines matter. Represent Cody in that matter before the Baltimore City jury, Baltimore County jury received a huge verdict that we're still trying to collect. Another conversation for another day. But because we had done that kind of work and had been successful, the ACLU reached out to me. I was happy to look at this matter. But the ACLU did much more in this case. They didn't just refer the case and step back. They became an equal partner in representing the coalition, therefore representing the Black family in many respects before the courts as well. And they actually did something very unique in that, we generally sue the police officers for these actions. We sue the county, the jurisdiction. What we had not done before was to sue the medical examiners for what they have been doing. And what Dr. Fowler and others, you've heard the name Dr. Fowler and how he testified, out in the George Floyd case for Chauvin. So it was the ACLU that had the brilliant idea, long overdue, to try to hold these medical examiners accountable, because they're the ones who allowed these police officers in many respects to get away with the crimes that they commit. Without further ado, let's hear from Debbie and Gian.
Anton Black should be alive today. When the ACLU first learned of Anton's killing by police, months after his death, it seemed shocking that the murder of a black teenager by law enforcement could be kept quiet for so long. In the days and weeks after Anton's murder, police and state officials blocked the family's access to records and painted a distorted version of events, claiming no force was used and falsely portraying Anton as a dangerous person. It was shocking, but at the same time, the story is all too familiar. Too many black lives lost to police violence. Too many families like the Black family forced to rise up to fight official cover-ups, even while grieving loss of their loved ones. As counsel for the Coalition for Justice for Anton Black, the ACLU is supporting the family's demands for justice and reform of the policies that led to Anton's murder. This includes claims against the police, as well as a novel challenge to the Maryland medical examiner's conspiracy to cover up police killings. In Anton's case, longtime MP David Fowler ruled the death accidental, despite clear evidence of positional asphyxia and more than 43 blunt trauma wounds inflicted by police. That's right, the same ME who made national news last spring with his failed effort to convince a Minneapolis jury that Derek Chauvin should escape responsibility for George Floyd's murder has also tried to shield the police officers responsible for killing Anton. It's a disturbing thing we see again and again here in Maryland. Police killings classified as accidents or the result of pre-existing conditions, not only in Anton's case, but in those of Mr. Tyrone West, Mr. Teron Boyd, and too many others. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to know Anton personally, but I do know Anton's inspiring legacy. It's one that lives on in the police transparency and accountability law that bears his name, and in the Black family's urgent work to ensure that what happened to Anton never happens again. Say his name, Anton Black.
I don't even know how it would feel to be the Black family. We have worked with them for the last several years to try to get justice for Anton, but as someone said earlier, the justice would be that Anton is alive today. That's the only real justice. You can't get that. But to watch this family, to see how they have struggled and persevered through these difficult times, to see and hear the strength in that family. They are an amazing family. I could not even imagine what Renee Swafford said to be Janelle Black and to watch your son be killed in front of you. My police officers who held him down, very much like they held down George Floyd. It has to be something that every day they remember. But this family has fought hard. They don't give up. And more important than hearing from us, I would like you to hear from three members of the family. To hear from Latoya Holly, Anton's sister, Janelle Black, his mother, Anton Black, his father. And they're going to come to you in that order to say a few words, not just about Anton's law. That's a great accomplishment. But every time we speak, we should be talking about Anton and who he was and the kind of person he was. And no one can tell us that better than those who loved him most. Ms. Holly?
About a year after Anton was murdered, I had someone that I've known for many years say something to me that I just cannot let it go. And he said, "Oh, you're still grieving. as if it was abnormal or unusual for me to still grieve my brother. And it's been 3 years now, and we're still grieving. We are trying to fight for justice for an extraordinary young man who, as far as my opinion, is never really truly got to reach his full manhood since he was taken at the age of 19. I do want to say something very quickly because my parents can certainly give you enough information about how wonderful Anton was and how well loved by every member of the family, regardless of age that Anton is. But I do want to ask the media as well. I believe the previous speaker had mentioned that Anton was demonized purposefully and was made out to be this really bad young man to stop, or to, I should say, prevent the media from actually reporting accurate information. They took the narrative that was provided to them by the law enforcement officers and ran with it. And that, to me, is not something that I would expect a journalist to do. I expect that the journalists would do their due diligence and make sure that all the information that's reported is actual and factual. It is something that I've never forgotten. Of course, it's forgiven, but the killings aren't going to stop. And I just wanted to say very quickly that please do your homework first, because reporting the incorrect information, it sets the family back even further. Because not only do we have to try to get justice for Anton, we fought very hard to try to clear his name for the monster they tried to make him out to be when he was not. I'm sorry you guys never got a chance to meet him. You all would have loved him if you had 5 minutes with him. I guarantee he was just that exceptional of a person. And I do thank you all for your time, and I'm not going to keep you any further. Thank you.
I am Anton Black. Black. This is my baby boy. This is Anton. My son was walking up the street in his own hometown with his cousin, his friend. When the cops come to him and pulled him over, they were walking. He went over to the car. He didn't run, like I saw somebody said. And he was standing there talking to the police officer. He was afraid of him. This was Wesley, a bully. He was not on black people. I'm not sure about people. Nobody tried to talk to him. Anyway, he's standing there talking to him. But when we look at the store video, you'll see what really happened. Can y'all hear me? No. Put me louder. You hear me now?
Yes.
I don't have no loud voice. Two white men come running from the store. He's still standing there talking to this big cop who was afraid of him. This cop is beat on black people. 2 weeks before that this happened to Anton, or 3 weeks, they beat up a 16-year-old boy. Same cop, same town, almost the same spot. She has the video if anybody wants to see it. So he was afraid of them anyway. So he's standing there talking to them, then 2 guys come running from him with bad intentions. It's caught on the store videos. That's when he takes off. He says, I didn't do anything to him, he's my little brother. Well, that's what he called him. He worked with a lot of young boys. He was a good kid. That's his coach over there. He looked up to him. He had good people that he looked up to. He stayed with the chief of police, not the bad one, but the Jackson, wasn't it? Spent the night over there with his kids. What kind of kid he was? No bad person. Stayed at the mayor's house with his kids. They white. No bad person. Cook for the police, didn't he? Cook for the police community. They knew who he was. They knew who he was. He was not bad. He was a young man that was an athlete. Coach over there taught him how to high jump. In just 2 seasons, he went from 5-something to 6'4". He's only 5'9". Anybody know anything about track? He was a football star. Everybody knew him. The whole town knew him. It's a small town. They jumped him, ran after him, accused him of kidnapping a child. Well, the young man standing right beside him when they called him over there. He didn't move. He didn't say, help me. He didn't say he did anything to me. He's standing there scared to death himself. From the videos on the store, if you ever want to play it, you see 4 or 5 people come running at him. The 2 on foot, one in a big SUV, that bigger than cop Webster, who was it? And a guy on a motorcycle with a rubber hat. They're all chasing him like he could kill somebody. Manos. My son didn't have a knife, he didn't have a gun, he had a stick or a brick. He's walking down the street like this. They attacked him. He runs to his house. He took criminal justice in college. He wanted to be a state trooper. So he runs to his house. That's where the escalation. They broke into his car, come to his mother's yard. Car 4 feet from the house. They knocked on the door, broke in, and took him out. They kidnapped him. He didn't kidnap nobody. They threw him on the ground, they beat him, they choked him. He's crying for his mother. My son was George Floyd before George Floyd. Huh? And there's no justice so far for Anton Black. And there's no peace for me. This is killing me. I've gained 60-some pounds. I can't go out. I can't sleep. I hear him in my sleep, please don't kill me. He's begging the people that have beat him, stomped him, tased him, I think. And he told him he didn't do anything. Now this is not a stranger, this is somebody everybody in that little town knows. This boy was on national TV modeling in New York Fashion Week. This child right here, from a little small town. He was working at Walmart. He always worked or did something. He went in Walmart. He wanted to go in the back. They put him up front on the cash register. He said, Dad, I don't want to be out there. I got to talk to people. I said, well, yeah, they want you up front. He come to me and said, well, Dad, after 2 weeks, he said, people tell me I should be a model or an actor. I said, well, go for it. Little did I know he's going to have me in modeling everywhere. D.C., Virginia, New York.
He made it and don't even know he made it.
Yeah, they killed him before he got to where he was going.
They wanted him in Milan, Italy.
Yes.
They were looking for him and they didn't know he was
Dead.
dead.
They were going to pay him, fly him to Milan, Italy, and let him model there. And when he got done, they were going to bring him back to California, let him apply his trade. And what was his trade? He was a model and an actor. He wanted a part in the movie. We used to practice his lines with him, his script. This is a good kid. He wasn't trying to kidnap nobody. For what? His whole life was ahead of him. He did more than 18, 19 years than most people do in 20 lifetimes. This is an injustice. It was brutality. And I think they did it on purpose. Little small town with no crime, all these people are chasing my child. If I had been there, Guido could die. They'd had to kill me. Because he didn't do a thing. And they know he didn't do nothing. I think they set him up. They didn't like him. He's a black guy on TV. Who knows? What they did wasn't right, and I hope he gets some kind of justice. With good people backing us, we should see some kind of justice. But they murdered my child. And the only person being kidnapped that day was him. They broke in his car, in his yard, 4 feet from his mother's door. They didn't make a lot of noise or nothing, no sirens. They broke the window, then they hit it. It said ping. Look at the video. But if you can look, if anybody can research it, get the one from the store that showed what really happened. It'll show them coming block by block, just walking side by side. Nobody's being kidnapped, nobody's being beaten. It's a lie they put out on him. But the truth is they kidnapped him. They took him out of his car in his mother's yard and beat him and choked him. Oh, what? This is a good kid. Hey, good people to look up to. He wanted to be, he used to tell me, Dad, I want to be somebody. My God, he was on his way. How many people been on national TV models? This kid did, from a little small town. Huh? A champion in track. A champion in football. On his way in life, and they snatched it from him because he's black. Mine, he's walking in broad daylight in his own hometown. down the street like this. Houses on one side, cars running back and forth, stores. And they said they tried to kidnap the child, but if you look at the video, all they're doing is walking and talking on their way home. His cousin is married to my daughter, so we're all in the same family. Anton used to stay at his house. He used to stay at our house. His older brother was Anton's best friend. They ran track together. You know, nobody was kidnapping nobody. They came up, the cops seen they were just walking, but it was the wrong cop. It was the biggest. He's the one that says you're under arrest. For what? Walking down the street? Then here they come, they're going to jump him. We have the video, if anybody wants to see it, of what the same cop did in the same town. Greensboro. Beat up a 16-year-old child.
15 minutes before this happened, Ruster told me he had been seeing Anton and the child earlier that on the horse fair around town on my granddaughter's farm. And then 15 minutes before they murdered him, Ruster said, oh, they just got from playing basketball. So you just seen these two boys all day around the town, then 15 minutes you see them playing basketball, and then they walking towards the house. He was walking to the house to come get my car because I asked him to go get my granddaughter. And his car had a flat top. And she's here because she was coming to get her.
And he went up into the car. So what they break into the car for? He couldn't go nowhere. There was a tree in the back. They were back up. Flat tire, they got a big SUV in the car. They murdered this child. They took him out and they did him away with it. Somebody needs to help us. There's justice for Anton somewhere. It needs to happen. Who wants to got something? We got something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. As I said, I could not, I still can't imagine what they are feeling each and every day. You can see and you feel the pain Mr. Black is expressing. There are a couple of things that are unsalable here, which is that we know that Thomas Webster is exactly what Mr. Black said, a bigoted cop. He has a history in Delaware, where he had assaulted over 29 African Americans. One incident where he kicked the man in the face who was unarmed and down, and he was prosecuted. He then was fired from the police department. He came to Caroline County. He had a police chief who falsified records so that he could be hired. He would never been hired in the state to work as a police officer if the truth had been told. That police chief was then prosecuted for falsifying those records. We know another thing, which is that Anton had a mental illness. He suffered from bipolar disorder. He'd just been released from the hospital a few days before this incident. This is not how we are to treat individuals with a disability. Too many of these cases that we have are where individuals who are mentally ill are being killed by police officers. Officers are being sent to their homes supposedly to help them. And over, they kill them. They shoot them. They hold them down and suffocate them, as in Anton's case. We know that until we get rid of things like qualified immunity, where these police officers have this protection under the law, that the Constitution never guaranteed them, that we are not going to be able to get justice, and the murders will not stop. Because these officers get away with it. They get away with killing black and brown people. They get away with killing mentally ill people. Some changes have been made. Anton's law is going into effect tomorrow. That is a great thing. But as the delegates and the senator told you, that is a beginning. The end is far away, and let's hope that next year, this coming year, in the General Assembly, when they're back in talking about what next to do, that they're going to do more. I hope that on the national level, that the George Floyd reform bill gets passed, that qualified immunity is wiped out. But today is a day to remember Anton Black, and we thank each and every one of you who have come here today, traveled from the Eastern Shore to be with the family. You all continue to support them. They know it, they love you, and they appreciate what you're doing. We thank the press for coming out, because without you helping us to tell the story, look, there are few of us here, a good crowd here, but it's what you do with this information to the press later on to disseminate it to all of those out there, whether this will have any real impact on getting justice for Anton and for those like Anton. Thank you very much.